That's awesome. So I know that time is running short, and this panel, I am sorry to say, does not have the number of minutes that our previous panels did. So I don't want to delay them any further. But our final panel, Debriefs, forecast for today, unpredictable with a chance of vague, provides insights into the type of information that our colleagues in industry are seeking in both written and oral debriefs. And by way of comparison or analogy, have you ever popped on the TV and turned on your favorite weather guesser and heard something like, "We've got a high-pressure system coming out of the west, pushing a weather front, creating an adiabatic lapse rate, exhibiting a complex explosive cyclogenesis or bombogenesis with enough convective available potential energy to create a massive mesoscale convective complex. I think we are looking at the possibility of a positive vorticity advective." I don't even know what all those words mean. You want to know the temperature. You want to know if it's going to rain. Do you need a coat? Do you need an umbrella? And so too it is with our colleagues in industry who are simply seeking, with the response to a given solicitation, how did it turn out, and how can we do better the next time? So let's join again our final panel, Debriefs, forecast for today, unpredictable, with a chance of vague, and welcome our moderator, Elizabeth L. Nattar, CEO of Tricor Industries.
Hello, everyone. So, we're here, to talk about the importance of debrief and sharing the industry perspective on why it's important and what's the process in various companies, both large and small. So our awesome panelists, I kind of wanted to cheat because I thought I was going to have this, PowerPoint, so I'm going to see if I can remember their names. So. Starting from the furthest end, this is Ms. Danita Conway. She is the president and CEO of Proven Management, a small business. And then we have Mr. Michael McHugh, vice president of GDIT, a large business. And then we have Ms. Amina Alguasam, president and CEO of Neostec, a small business. And then we have our wonderful Mr. John Roman, vice president of Logistics Management Institute, short for LMI. I'm Elizabeth L. Nattar. I'm Tricor Industries. Like John said, I represent a mid-tier business. I am the CEO and indentured servant for Tricor Industries. So, anyway, like the government, industry partners spend a tremendous amount of money in the bidding process. In fact, the entire life cycle takes about 4 to 5% of the revenue of the contract's revenue, and just responding to the RFP alone takes about 2%, right? So whenever a contract is awarded, we're pretty emotional. So, so our panelists are going to teach us their perspectives on various briefings. So we have a total of 4 subtopics under debriefing. The first one is to discuss what kind of information we're looking for, how do we get the information, how does it help us, why, right? And the second one is to give us a sneak peek into the industry's process after an award is awarded, and what does it look like? What does our debriefing process look like? And the third one is, how does the debriefing quality and style affect the bidder's decision to challenge an award? The infamous P word. It's my least favorite word in government contracting. Towards the end, before we start our Q&A, we're going to try to provide some creative ideas on how we can bring value to each other through a bi-directional debriefing model. So anyway, without further ado, I'm going to start picking on John because he's the closest to me with the first question is what kind of information do you look for in a debrief, whether it's pre or post award, and how does it help you?
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having us here. We really do appreciate the ability to communicate with all of you guys and have a conversation. When talking about a debrief, it really is near and dear to our hearts. You've heard in some of the previous panels about the fact that we put in a lot of effort into these, and frankly, we spend a lot of money on proposals in general. And in doing that, when we need a debrief, and frankly, you'll find from our company anyway, I actually required that our folks ask for a debrief, win or lose. And that may be a pain in the neck, and I do understand that. But a lot of times, even when you win, You learn a lot during your debrief. What we're really looking for is what are the things we've done well and what have we done poorly? And there's a reason for that. Oftentimes what we'll do is, we generally have an area of expertise that we're going after, a type of work that we do over and over again. And we'd like to do that with your agency and with others, and we'd like to do that wherever we can. So oftentimes we end up using the same past performance. We end up starting with maybe a template that we've created to talk about our management plan, or to talk about, if we have a technical proposal that we're doing the same sort of work over and over again. We're starting with something because it's a limited amount of time to create these responses. So what we really want to find out is, what did we do right? What did we do wrong? And sometimes you'd be shocked at how much of the same information is really looked at differently, even within the same organization. I mean, I've had times where we've had an IDIQ contract or a BPA where we have a series of RFPs that come out at the very beginning, or RFQs, and they all require a management plan. We write one and we think it's great, and then we get our first award notice and we lost. And we get our debriefing and we find out the management plan that we thought was so great because it had scored well, even maybe on the BPA award, got hammered in the task order proposal. And all of a sudden now we've written 4 more proposals using that same basic management plan, and now we're in trouble. So the more that we can learn up front, we can use that to help ourselves tailor future proposals. Because really, no surprise, all the companies that are up here want to win work. That's what we're trying to do, and we want to do a great job for the government. I think all of us would tell you we'd much rather have a long-term customer that we do work with for a generation than a one-time customer that we go and try and do work with one time. That's just not what we're looking for. So all that stuff helps us feed information on what did we do well. Also, what did we do poorly? And really what we want to know in the end is, why did we win or lose? What was it about our proposal that got us to wherever situation we're in right now? And sometimes why you win is almost as surprising as why you lose. And it really is amazing sometimes. The other thing we want to know is, were we treated fairly? They told us to use examples, so here's one I can use an example for. I remember a time, it was actually a GSA proposal, where we bid on something, and we used past performance, and we thought we had great past performance. It was with the person who was likely to be the core on this particular job, and we had been doing work that we thought was really the only relevant past performance out there, at least in our very much jaded eyes probably. But we used that past performance, and in the debrief, what we found out is they said, well, we decided that we would only give a neutral to anyone who had past performance with that core. We weren't really going to evaluate that. Well, we kind of thought that put us at a disadvantage rather than at an advantage. Instead of getting a really good score that we thought we would, we actually got a neutral, which didn't help us. So we didn't feel like we were treated fairly. And we let the contracting officer know that. And actually, to their credit, they actually went and halted the award and reevaluated, which I thought was a great answer, without a protest, with just a discussion. And I thought that was a really good option for both sides. Now, did we win it in the end? No, we didn't. But regardless, it was a good outcome, and I think it served the process well, and it served both sides well. The other thing we always want to know, all right, a lot of you are probably awarding things through FAR Part 8 and FAR Part 12, and the requirement there is just a brief explanation of what the award was based upon. I'll tell you, for the most part, that's not what we're hoping for. We're really looking for something that's a little more in line with probably FAR Part 15. A brief summary is, the less we find out in a debrief, the more suspicious we are. It's just how it goes. Don't forget that all of us up here and throughout the industry, we're spending money, the company's money, when we do a bid. So we've got to go back and tell someone why we lost. And if it's a one-liner that I really don't know what it is, and if I've spent a lot of money, people are going to want to know more. And oftentimes that terrible P word comes out, at least in conversation, even if it doesn't happen. And I'll tell you, it probably comes out in conversation a lot more than it actually happens, because cooler heads do prevail in the end. But it's one of those things that if we don't have enough information, they want to try and get it another way. And that's the way that a lot of people who maybe don't even understand, you'd be shocked at how many people don't understand the actual procurement process, but are in this business and have been for a lifetime. They don't understand exactly what a protest actually relies on and what really is the acquisition process. So we're able to talk people out of that a fair amount. But oftentimes what we're really looking for is more of a FAR Part 15 debrief than a just brief explanation of why we won or lost. The last thing I want to hit on is pre-award versus post-award debriefs. I think the panelists up here actually differ on our opinions there. I would tell you that for myself, a pre-award debrief is only good if it gets me if I hear something that gets me back into the competition. I'd rather have a post-award debrief where maybe I can get a little bit more information about what the awardees' cost was with the awardees, what stood out for us versus them, where we finished in line, and that kind of stuff. But that's my own opinion.
Very good. Thank you, John. I just want to remind everybody, if you have questions, please email them to reverseindustrytraining@gsa.gov, because we get it right here, and we can try to work some of the questions in during the discussion. So thank you, John. Amina, could you share your perspective briefly from a small business perspective?
Sure. GSA, thank you for having us. I am honored to be in this panel representing the small businesses alongside another successful woman-owned small business, Danita, as well as the large businesses. As far as debriefs, I think debriefing is the most emotional, but for me it's the most exciting part, because I'm getting feedback on the hard work that we've done as a small business. And that's the only thing that actually makes us better, makes our processes better internally, and gives us a focus. Just to give you an example, some of the debriefs that we've got probably rated us excellent on management, excellent with our transition plan. However, we were missing a transition schedule. So that tells me that in the future we can reuse that transition plan, which saves us time in that area. But then we need to include the transition schedule. And also what that tells me is that, okay, we might have some compliance issues. So I have to have more resources dedicated towards compliance. Also, another example of a debrief we got was for the key personnel resumes. Okay, we have exceeded expectations in the resumes. They love the resumes we provided. They asked for five-year experience. We provided 10, 15-year experience. But what that did is it drove the prices up, right? So, but we made that decision based on the information that we got, prior to the RFP, where we had an understanding of the pain points of the customers, where they had issues internally. Incumbent was not able to staff because they had a low price. So we had a better understanding of the pain points, and we were trying to address those pain points. But that drove our price up. And so then we had to evaluate, okay, is this a high-risk project? Is this a high-risk organization? We were asked to provide a TS-SCI personnel, which tells you that has impact on national security. It's a high-risk project, so we didn't want to low bid it, even though it was a best value. We didn't want to provide, low-level resources just to win the contract. For us as small businesses, at the end of the day, is to solve our customer problems and be able to perform. So that allowed us to make several decisions internally and figure out what we want to focus on internally. Also, another lessons learned from key personnel resumes, we learned that when in doubt, ask questions. We had a proposal where we provided only key personnel resumes. They were asking to provide all personnel resumes, but then we put in all personnel resumes, and then when we went through the compliance check, we were not sure, so we only included the key personnel resumes. So when we received our debrief, we found out that actually the customer was looking for all personnel resumes, not just key personnel resumes. So we learned to ask questions, even if the deadline for the Q&A is way past. If in doubt, asking the questions. But I think what we would expect from the government is please cooperate with us, because having that communication up front during before the proposal due date is more important than complaining after, because we don't want to complain.
Thank you, Amina. All right, in the interest of time, Michael and Danita, do you have anything to add?
I do have something to add. What I like to do first is to put you in our shoes up here. So I'll give you a real life scenario. Imagine giving someone Christmas presents or birthday presents. You always want to know how they felt about it. Did they like it? Was it the right size? Did they take it back? Or imagine you playing sports, or us women who were cheerleaders. The bottom line is we always wanted to please somebody. That's how we feel when we give a proposal to the government. All essentially, we want to please the person that's reading it. So not receiving a debrief takes away the joy of knowing what we can correct. I'll give you the best example. Back 2013, maybe, the Food and Drug Administration put out a $50 million contract. Well, I'm in logistics, so that's major. And I completely failed that proposal, but I didn't get it. I was like, wait a minute, hold on. Much like myself, I'm like, I wrote it perfectly. I'm a great writer. Temple University, University of Maryland, both gave me A's in English. What do you mean I failed? So I queued up everybody I need to with my angry hat on going, I want this contract. And again, it was a make or break deal for me, right? So I queued up everybody and I sent the email out, and the contracting officer was so helpful. He gave me a debrief that was 3 pages long. And it told me everything that I needed to do. Now, mind you, he might have nitpicked because I misspelled a word, but I can tell you this, it never happened again. The value to that is that he took a few minutes out of his day. He compiled this list of things that I needed to change. And what he did was he made an impact to my organization for the rest of the time that Proven Management is here doing business with the federal government. So for me, for my company, for the small businesses of the world, because I've always worked for small businesses, we can excel without understanding what we need to change. So that's my big deal about the value of it. The value of a pre-brief for me is really understanding what you want and what you're looking for up front. If you can tell me, I can do it. Now, I'm not going to whine and cry when I'm not the selected ones. But again, anything that you can give me up front really makes my job just a little bit easier. And can I give one more thing?
Sure, of course.
Does it help in the future? When on future contracts, absolutely. Because based upon your debrief can tell me whether or not you're interested in doing business with my company. Not just that we didn't respond, but let's be honest. Some people want this size business or that size business. So that's why debrief is very helpful to us.
Okay, Erica, thank you.
First, I'd like to say thank you for the opportunity. I think these to and fro's are really important, and it's been done in GSA before. Susan Bethke before me, I'm the Oasis and Alliant Program Manager at GDIT, and those folks have been organizing this kind of thing for a long time. It's really helped their programs. They're very good programs as a result. I can put it in a nutshell for you as far as debriefings go, and what we see lately. The trend is toward providing less information in a debriefing, and we think that's a mistake. We think we need to provide more information. More is better in this case. In particular, we want to know where were we weak, where were we strong, and we will take that to work and do something with it and give you a better proposal next time. A really important study by the Professional Services Council concluded a couple of years ago that the number one reason, not the only reason, but the number one reason why firms protest an award decision is because they didn't get enough information in the debriefing. So their conclusion, or their recommendation, I should say, was to require or mandate even that you have to provide at least as much information in a debriefing as you would have to give pursuant to a protest. And that makes plenty of sense to me. There's no point in that tug of war which wastes everyone's time, the requirements manager, the contracting shop, and the set of vendors who bid. So I think that alone would mitigate. And you don't have to wait till it's a mandate. It may never be a mandate. But I think it's a good rule of thumb. It's a good way to think about it. We want to know what we could have done better. And we also, the last point I'll make, we want to and fro. we want to be able to ask for clarification. We don't want an overly structured process where we can't say, well, what did you mean by that? We want the opportunity for a little bit back and forth, not one round of questions, or we see sometimes no questions. We're all going to get more value out of it if there's a little bit of to and fro. And you've heard that in previous sessions about solicitations and draft solicitations. Same thing applies to a debriefing, I think.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Actually, what is your position on written versus oral debriefing? Michael.
I like both. Something that we can look at in advance and then come in and get a briefing on. Again, that's more information, right? And a chance to ask for clarification. I mean, that's the best I've seen.
Okay, all right. Do you have something to add, John, from between written versus oral debriefing, especially if the oral debriefing may in itself just be prepared script in which no additional information outside of prepared script may be answered?
I think I'd always take a in-person debriefing if I have the opportunity.
Okay. How about small business?
You learn a lot
We all agree?
from body language. You learn a lot from, you really see the pain points when you can see it on someone's face when they say, that part, not only am I telling you it was awful, it was awful. I mean, you can see that. And unfortunately, I've seen it. I've also seen when it was really good that it was really good. And there's a difference between words and what you do in paper. It's just like there's that occasional email that we all write that we wish we hadn't hit send on because we didn't read it carefully enough, or the other person saw something completely different in what was on the paper, and that's the kind of stuff, and it's really that follow up and that back and forth that allow you to really learn something, and on both sides, because sometimes I think we get to kind of comment, even though it doesn't change the outcome, we get to kind of tell our story a little bit as well, and maybe sometimes it's a miscommunication about the RFP and what was in there as well.
That's great. Thank you so much, John. So, Amin? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, quickly. I like the in-person debrief. However, it would be nice to have the written before you go to the in-person debrief, because I've had a case where, we've had a case where we found out about the compliance issue as soon as we got to the in-person debrief. And the compliance issue was about, they were asking for a 30-page double space, and we provided a 30-page single space. So what that did is that when I brought in my technical resources to the debrief, we couldn't really talk about the technical part because they did not evaluate the entire proposal. They only evaluated the 15-page. So had I known that information beforehand, I would have made better decisions in terms of who I will bring with me to the debrief.
Okay. And Amina, who do you bring to the debrief?
Oh, wonderful. Yes, absolutely. So I usually like to take the technical resources that wrote the solution, because we're an IT company. Our subject matter experts that came up with the architecture or the solutioning, as well as our program manager who contributed to the proposal, and myself. So, and the thing is that there's a cost, just to let you know, there's a cost to bringing in those resources even to the debrief, because as a small business, everyone is billable. We don't have that overhead. We don't have people sitting on the bench waiting for us to work on RFPs. So even as we're working on the RFPs and taking out those resources from their billable time, those technical subject matter experts, we have to get them out of their billable work or work on the weekends and the evenings to put those solutions. So there is a big cost to it, as well as an opportunity cost for missing out on other working on other proposals. So
great, thank you so much. And Michael, what is your debriefing process from a large business perspective? And also, sometimes you guys bring legal professionals. If you could explain to us why you bring them, what's the purpose and your intent?
Well, in general, we do not bring them. For some of the reasons Amina just mentioned, it's expensive to take them away from their primary mission, and we do a lot of bids and a lot of proposals. So we generally don't. When they show up is an interesting point. How many people here are familiar with the OMB Mythbusters #3 memo? I'm always disappointed when I see how many, because you've got to read that thing. It's a magnificent document, and it speaks to this issue wholly. It's got links that are live to it that take you to debriefing manuals from places like NASA, DOD, and DHS. And it's also got an appendix in the back that raises a lot of very specific issues, and they call them myths, and then it tells you why they're myths, and you don't have to necessarily believe in it. One of those points is that some firms will always bring, maybe that's true, we rarely bring counsel. When we do, and unlike the Mythbusters point, they said, don't think it means there's going to be a protest. Well, that's true. It doesn't mean there's going to be a protest, but it means we're closer to it. That's why we have them there. So now what I would tell you is if you clam up as a result of that, it's going to backfire. And we want more information in this case intensely. So I would say I wouldn't brush it off. And I think part of the question, too, was what happens when the government brings theirs. We don't worry about that. We're there to get information. And if we get it, you're going to mitigate some of the protest risk. We don't protest much, and we rarely send counsel. So I don't think it's a big deal. I think the rules of game for effectiveness are always the same. Share the information.
Thank you, Michael. And John, how can the government help you save some legal costs so you can just come by yourself and, the rest of the staff without a lawyer? And how does it make you feel when the government brings a lawyer and does most of the talking during debrief?
I will tell you that I'm with Michael. We don't bring attorneys. So I'm the vice president of contracts at LMI. I've been to or been involved in more debriefs than most people who aren't in the government. I'm one of the people that's always invited. I've never been to a debrief with a lawyer. Just don't do it. But I would agree with Michael as well that I have seen other companies bring attorneys, and he's right. When they bring attorneys, that's a sign that they're seriously concerned about something that has happened or that they perceive may have happened in that particular case. I think that who the government brings, to me, is almost irrelevant. What I'd like them to bring is, in terms of their position, what I'd like them to bring is the people who were on the evaluation committee, the people who actually know most about my bid and can answer the questions that I'm going to have about my bid. Because really, I'm going to ask you about my bid. You're not going to tell me anything about anyone else's bid, so why would I ask any of that stuff? So I'm going to ask about my bid, and I'm going to want to know, hey, if you thought I was terrible at this one spot, what about that was bad? What did I do wrong? Where did I miss the boat? Because again, we're using this to bid on the next job. Yeah, right. That's really what these things are all about. And protests do come up. There's no doubt about that. But we go into these things looking to find out what we did well and what we did poorly, win or lose, and that's just kind of how it goes.
Thank you, John. Great. And sometimes, in a mid-sized business, the lawyer has dual hats. Maybe he's a contracts manager too. So sometimes he shows up, even though he has Esquire at the end of his name. It really doesn't mean, he's there as a lawyer, but as a contracts director. So there are some scenarios like that, right? So thank you. Now, John, since you're so eloquent, you might as well just continue. So what is your experience on, the type and style and quality of debriefing that might have affected your decision on challenging an award?
Okay, so this is where we get into the dirty little secrets part. So I've worked for a number of companies. I have been involved in protests, and I have been involved in not protests. In other words, where the company thought, hey, we should protest, and we've said no. So I'll talk about that a little bit. First of all, I would tell you that just like you guys probably all know companies that protest a fair amount. We all have what I'll call a signature. There are certain companies out there that, from our perspective, are good teaming partners, and from our perspective, are bad teaming partners. I'm sure you guys have the same sort of effect on different companies out there and whether or not they're going to protest. We all kind of have something that we do consistently. And I think it's different for everybody, and it's even in a large company, I'll tell you, it may be different for different parts of that company. That's certainly been my experience. When I go to a debrief, and I'll tell you, I have gone to a debrief with orders from my boss to say, look and see if there's a way to protest this, for whatever reason. We're the incumbent, and I'm not telling you anything you don't know. I'm just being honest. We're the incumbent, or we thought we wrote a really good proposal, or, in some cases, we're all frenemies up here. We're friends today and enemies tomorrow. We're bidding on something together today, and at the same time, we're finding out about an award we bid against each other yesterday, on the same day, and it happens all the time. So don't be surprised when someone comes in for a debrief and they already heard that the winning price was X, because you already debriefed their partner on a bid that they're bidding tomorrow. And that's just how it goes. So there are times where we go into these things and we already know the winning price was $75 million or whatever it was. And our price was $60 million, and how the heck did we lose if that's the case? Just being honest. I'm not trying to blow smoke, I'm just being real. And like I said earlier, there's someone's boss's boss is saying, if we were $15 million cheaper, how did we lose? What kind of proposal did you people write? And it goes from there. So, people's jobs are on the line. And sometimes if you're the incumbent, you may have a couple of hundred people's jobs who are on the line. So, and really, most companies would tell you this. Most of our employees are like family. I mean, they really are. We're good companies, their management is trying to look out for their people. For a lot of us who are services companies, our people are what we sell. They are the most important thing we have going for us. So if we lose some because we lose work, we're losing absolutely valuable assets. So it's more than just a scorecard or dollars. It's people too, and that becomes really difficult. So a lot of times, what I would tell you is this: when I go into a debriefing, I bring two things every time. I bring, and you're going to hear stuff from my first answer and the first question, I bring the FAR Part 15 stuff, even if it's not a FAR Part 15 contract, because that's the information I want to know. And then I have a list of questions that are derived from that. It's not even 10 questions total. I think it's 9. I bring the same one every time. It sits there on my desktop. And I bring Part M of the RFP. I bring what are the evaluation criteria. Those are the only two things that matter. They're the only two things that matter in a debrief as far as I'm concerned. What did I do well? What did I do poorly? If it's a best value procurement, what was the cost technical trade-off that you did if I was a lower price? Those are the only things that really come to matter. But I'll tell you this, I've been in debriefs where I've learned an awful lot. Like I said earlier, I was sent to one, it happened to be with NASA. And we had spent a ton of money, and we had spent 2 years actually going after this bid, actively. We had gone down, it was at NASA Langley, we had gone down there countless number of times with countless amount of people, and we didn't win, and my boss said, see if there's a way. I went down there, I called him from the road on the way back and said, sorry, boss, no chance. They gave us a complete debriefing. They weighed out every single mistake we made. They showed us why things that we had done and things that we had assumed were wrong. And frankly, our price was basically the same. It was a rounding error. And the awardee didn't make as many mistakes as we did. It's just the truth. Yep. And I came back to my boss and said, look, they evaluated it exactly like they said they would. They gave me all the reasons why I wasn't scored as highly as the awardee, and our price was the same. We lose. That's it. Game over. Never even brought it to our legal team at the time. It's a previous company. At the same time, I've gone to other places where we walked out, and people up here have said that this is an emotional decision, where I walked out with that same person who was my boss at the time, and he was downtrodden and said, oh my God, how did we just got killed on this. And I looked at him and I said, if you want to protest, you'll win 100% of the time. He's like, what do you mean? They told us we did all this stuff wrong. I said, yeah, but they didn't follow Section M at all. They said, management and technical in Section M said they're worth the same amount, and they said technical was more important, and they scored it that way. Okay. I said, we'd win every time. We didn't actually protest.
Thank you. Thank you, John. We have to move on so we can get to the rest of it. Thank you so much. And Danita, if you could share a real-life example with us where the quality of debriefing changed your mind about protest in probably less than 2 minutes.
Absolutely. I can actually share one from 2017 where we had bid a contract We knew that we understood it. The past performance was there. We were the perfect contractor. However, when we lost the bid, we went back to the contracting officer. Now, this one was a FAR Part 8, so he was only allowed or had to give us a short debrief. He went above and beyond for us, again, because it's about sharing information. So a lot of my experiences are very positive when it comes to debrief and the contracting officers that I have interact with. But the great news is that they shared everything that we did wrong in their perspectives. They told us some things that we can do right. So with that, we didn't have a reason to protest. Now, mind you, they also said that we could have. They were expecting it. They avoided my phone calls 15 times. They didn't answer any emails. And so just as my colleagues have said, I got a little antsy. What are they hiding? Just call me back. So I sent the email and said, hey, look, guys, I just want a discussion. That's it. They said, well, discussion is different than a debrief. I understand that. I just want to have a conversation. And the nice part about it was, again, he got it. He phoned my office, looked for me 5 times after that, gave me a real logical explanation as to what we did wrong, and we let it go. Now, my attorneys thought differently, but we don't always bring legal attorneys with us. We make good decisions. And at the end of the day, guys, remember, it's always about money, too. So when we decide to protest, it's a real reason behind it. We haven't gotten anything because a protest could cost $5,000 to $10,000 easily, depending upon what it is.
It's quite expensive. And most of the time, we just want to, get as much information as possible so we can learn from it, so we can do better in the future and move on to, winning more work. So that's what most of us is about. So, Michael, do you have anything to share?
As you can imagine, you've already heard, it's an emotional experience when you handle a loss, especially it's a big one. People have worked weekends and late nights, and there's a lot of emotion. And if you put a heat map over the group of people that read this debriefing, it's going to be red hot around the capture team. But fortunately for the system, both sides, there are blue sections in there too. And those are people who are farther from the proposal. They are closer to the relationship with that client and maybe that contracting shop. And they don't want to protest things in general. Now, in a nutshell, I can tell you the way it works, and you already heard a little bit of this from John. I remember a proposal where we lost, and the capture team called a meeting with legal counsel and with their contract management of their business unit. And those are usually the first-line decision makers about a protest or not. And they said this, and I thought it was funny at the time, and so did the contract managers. They said, okay, we have to protest. And then they looked at the contract managers and legal counsel, and they said, what are we going to protest? And those of us in the blue zone kind of chuckle at that. And the contract manager for the business unit said, look, they told us exactly and clearly what they were going to do in Section M, and they have documented exactly and clearly how they did that, and those two things match up. And so there's no protest. They did exactly what they said they were going to do. They've documented that process. Having said that, sometimes people, I would tell you to always err on the side to give more information. Sometimes people are going to protest anyway, and there's nothing you can do about it. And I don't think you should try to guess when that's going to happen because they were incumbent. It's a big dollar value. Just do the right thing by you and cross your fingers and hope that if you've done the right thing, you've documented it well, you've executed well, you're going to win at GAO. And that it's not a loss to you just because somebody protests. Sometimes that's beyond your control. So.
Thank you, Michael. And sometimes, I've had experience of, going to the chief procurement officer or deputy or the director to tell them, hey, we have some concerns, but we don't want to file protests. Would you please provide us with more information? A lot of protests are filed because of the lack of information from debriefing. If they had all of that information, then, industry typically wouldn't be moving that direction because it is really, really costly and time consuming. And everybody rather spend the time winning additional work than obsessing over one that you lost, right? We don't like to be sore losers. We just want to learn. So anyway, thank you guys very much. Now, in the next 4 minutes or so, I would like for Michael, Amina, and Danita to share with us what they think of a bi-directional debriefing model where, the government and industry provides feedback to each other, if they would be interested in that, and how do they think that, they can contribute to the process.
I'll be really brief because it's been said before, and that is the more back and forth that's allowed within the process, I think the better. If industry has avenue to communicate and get clarification other than protest, that's a really good thing for the whole system.
And I'll echo that. The idea of bi-directional would mean that we'll be able to help some things on the table that might help a better solicitation out front. So I would agree with Michael with the bi-directional would be very valuable.
Great, thank you. Do you have any?
Yes. So for bi-directional, we try to communicate. It's better to communicate before the RFP closing date. We try to do that as much as possible. For the bi-directional debriefing, we don't want to complain. That's just negative. We want to stay more on the positive side. We want it to be a learning experience for us. However, for providing feedback back to the government, I would suggest that would be more based on facts. For example, if there needs to be a process improvement for the RFP process that the agency is trying to do, maybe they can gather information on facts, which is, okay, what is the response time of the contracting officer? And we've had experience with that in an agency where we were a secret shopper and going through an application process, and that agency actually provided a completely separate process improvement group that had nothing to do with the application process. That way, the feedback and the information that's going back is more anonymous, and there is more free bi-directional information as opposed to, fear for protest or things like that. So I think if it's more focused on the positive experience for improvement and innovation within the agency, I think that's I see that better than the other way.
That's great. Thank you. All right, cool. Now, we have one question that's not directly related to debrief, so I'm looking for a volunteer. Basically, can you please talk about your investment in remaining compliant or contract administration component of the bid and the contract execution that has a major impact on future government business?
So I guess I'm the person who's the vice president of contracts up here, so I guess I get to take that one. Contract compliance is tough, let me tell you. I report to the CFO of our company, and one of the things that we did when I first got there was she and I talked about compliance, and she said, how do we know that we're compliant with all the things that we have to do? And I said, well, I was brand new at the time. I'm like, well, I'm learning that myself, at least here. But we actually went out to a couple of different places, both attorneys, some of the accounting firms, some of the just industry teams that are out there that do this kind of stuff. It's funny. There's none of them have like what you would think is that they'd be able to say, here's a checklist of all the things you need to be compliant with. That doesn't exist anywhere. A, it changes too fast. B, it's just such a huge list. It really is an amazing amount of work to be compliant just with all your contracts and stuff. And every single contract has its own compliance metrics. We actually have implemented a contract system where we actually input all the compliance requirements into that contract so we can run reports off it and things like that to help us with that. But that's a costly endeavor as well. In terms of proposal compliance, we normally have at least two to three people who are reviewing different sections of the proposal with compliance. The first thing we do is actually create a compliance matrix that takes the entire RFP, and then we do it again when the questions come out, and then we do it again when all the mods come out, and we actually create this compliance matrix that actually shows every single thing we're supposed to do, every will, every shall, anything that we can sit there that says, these are the things to be compliant. And then we have people checking against all those things. But it takes time, and B, it takes resources. But they're well spent because, like some of the panelists have said, when you go to a debrief and you find out you lost because you weren't compliant, man, that hurts. So it's worth it. But it's not cheap.
Yeah. And Amina and Danita, do you guys have anything to add from small business perspective?
I agree with him. It really hurts when you find out you're not compliant, with that double spacing versus single spacing, and then we couldn't really find value in the debrief because our proposal was not even evaluated.
My personal experience with compliance is that sometimes that can hurt you even more than the technical of the pricing is not having the SF 18, I believe, signed. So what we do is we put a lot of resources and money into that portion of our proposal and bid, just like John said, just so we can make sure that that is the one piece that we don't get dinged on.
Great, thank you. How about when you're awarded a contract, you start executing? Do you actually take what you have, what you get from the proposal and debriefing and try to implement it, or do you just go by the contract and SOW that you signed, or both?
When we win?
Yeah.
Yeah.
On rare
everyone
occasions.
Everyone says that we'll always get a debriefing when we win, and here's what I see down in the dirt. We say we want a debriefing, and the contracting officer says, got it, but I want to get to the non-awardees first. I didn't say losers, okay? And what happens is a lot of times on our side, we don't come back. We let it go. And all the resources get focused to that next big proposal. And then that debriefing doesn't necessarily happen. And I'll also tell you, it's not, I don't think that it's taken, in all honesty, I think it's human nature to not, you learn more from pain sometimes than you do from the awards. And I don't know, I wonder sometimes if the government side, if they're taking the debriefing, if they're being as incisive as they would be with somebody who lost when somebody won. So I think it's a good question. I think we should always do it, and I think we should all take it seriously. It's good for the system, but I'm not entirely sure it always happens.
Hey, Mike, I'll add to that. One of the reasons I asked my team to do it is because if we do find out that this award gets protested, all the non-awardees had their debrief and found out their strengths and weaknesses, and depending on what the corrective action is, I may not have that benefit because I didn't ask for a debrief. So that's one of the reasons we'll ask for a debrief even on a win.
Okay,
Can
great.
I add to that just for a second? So one of the reasons why we ask for a debrief on a win is because a lot of times you'll find out what they really loved about your proposal, and you have to live up to it. So if it was your communication plan, if it was your problem resolution plan, you want to know that's what won the proposal. That way, again, you're able to be stronger over the course of the contract.
So does it really help you, for the immediate contract that you just won, or does it also help you in the future?
For my personal experiences, it helps me both current and in the future. So we're a services agency, and everything we do, we have to apply lessons learned to it. So anything that we can find out is just literally applied across the board.
That's great. How
I've
about
got
you?
more on that. I like that question because I think GSA's great strength as the acquisition force within government is there's a lot of consistency across a broad area serving the entire federal government. And that consistency is a lot of strength. The breakdown in the value of a single debriefing to me is not as great when there are so many practices and so many contracts, IDIQs, and so many procedures and contracting shops and local policies. I think if in the next few years we can obliterate some of that, we're going to have a much better acquisition system. And I think GSA generally is the force leading that way.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Actually, we responded to all of the questions that was asked. So do we have any other questions? Well, thank you guys for being such a great audience. And thank you, awesome panelists. Here you go. Thank you.
Nicely done. Leave them wanting more. Again, a big hand for all of our panelists this morning. Just can't thank you all enough for coming in and helping us, helping us each other, as it were. If I may, to close our proceedings, I'd like to introduce an individual who is leading GSA's acquisition community to surmount the insurmountable, conquer the unconquerable. A man who has done so much with so little for so long, he can truly do anything with nothing forever. I am not saying that because I'm bucking for any kind of end-of-year award. I really mean that. Ladies and gentlemen, if you would be so kind, please welcome the U.S. General Services Administration's Senior Procurement Executive, Jeff Kosis.
Thank you, John. So let me open with just a quick word how this event came around today. Several months ago, I attended our meeting at the Chief Acquisition Officers Council, and there was really a phenomenal presentation given by Carla Thomas and Nina Ferraro of DHS, talking about their experience with a reverse industry day. I wouldn't let them out of the room after that presentation. We had quite a conversation. What went into it? How did they do it? What were some of the goals about it? And Carla's joined us today, has really supported Melissa and team in putting this together every step of the way. So let me start by thanking Carla for those efforts. So, with the idea, I then turned to Ms. Melissa and said, Melissa, we have a little task. Let's see, can we go do this? Can we put together such an event? Melissa, in turn, reached out to start talking to some of the industry associations. I think we ended up with 11 that immediately wanted to be part of this and helped us figure out how do we pull this together? How do we create a meaningful industry day? Don't see Kim Pack at the moment, but Kim, in the back. Okay, thank you, Kim. Helped take the lead in helping us really work across the associations, put together a meaningful agenda. And so, Kim, thank you for that work. We ended up with associations reached out to people who wanted to take their time to volunteer to participate in this. We had 51 industry representatives anxious for the chance to come in to talk to all of you, to talk about their perspective on the acquisition process, to walk through each step of that. Just think about that. 51 industry folks want to go volunteer to be part of this. I think we had 3 phenomenal panels, and thank all of them for those efforts. In the first panel, among other things, we heard some of the decisions that go into whether or not to bid on a opportunity. We heard that, depending on the figure we wanted to listen to, 25, 28, up to a 50% chance of winning. So, pretty clearly that there's also a pretty high expectation. We're not going to win every job that we go after, that BMP dollars are scarce, that we give a lot of consideration. When and how do we decide to make that investment? In the second panel, we heard even more about some of the costs of putting together a proposal. Out of all the figures, we heard 0.5%, 1%, 2%. The figure that really is going to stick with me, $3,000 a page to put together a meaningful proposal. That is tremendously expensive. That's saying that we are making a significant investment. And that's why we see so many steps along the process where our industry partners are saying, hey, we're going to proceed or we're not going to proceed, that this is something that we think we have a shot to win, that we add value, that we can be successful, that we can deliver a good outcome or not. And then with this third panel, we kind of concluded that story saying, okay, hey, we knew that we weren't guaranteed to win, but we pursued it. We made the investment. Now we want to understand, why did you make the decision? Why did we win? Why did we not win? I love that several of you talked from the perspective of asking for debriefing as the winning contractor, something that we probably don't see anywhere near enough in the process. I think you got some really good sense of clues. If they're asking for debriefing and they're saying, hey, I'm bringing my attorney with me, bring your attorney with you. That's telling you that something different is going on. But if they're really asking from the perspective, hey, it's the program manager, I want to understand how you made the decision, that is a really meaningful communication, because that's what leads to better long-term acquisition solutions. That's what the partnership is about. Today was a first for us. It was GSA's first reverse industry day. We hope that it was valuable to you. We hope that you gained information, understanding things that will help you be more effective in doing your job. You will get a survey, a chance to really give us that feedback. Is this something that is helpful? Are these topics that we should go into in greater detail in future sessions? Are these things that we should take on the road, have these conversations in some of our regional offices? Melissa, thank you for leading the effort. I see Sam. Sam has done a tremendous job in partnering with Melissa. Henry over there, thank you very much. And to all the GSA employees across the country who've taken the time to listen to this conversation, thank you. And just to close with one last thank you to all of our industry participants. We really appreciate your taking the time, you're sharing the thoughts, your perspectives with us. I see a number of folks have remained throughout all the sessions. I'm sure that they won't mind another couple minutes for anyone has some one-on-one questions for them. And with that, thank you all for coming. And John, great job moderating. Thank you, sir.